Welcome to the Handyman Hotline. Today we're going to talk about my house and the first year of homeownership and what we've been able to do from the kitchen to the garage to the basement and the roof. That and more on this episode of the Handyman Hotline. Roll the intro.
Mercury Stardust. She's a beacon of hope in the darkest night. Mercury Stardust. She'll teach you how to make it all alright.
Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals. My name is Mercury Stardust, and I am the trans handyman. Thank you for coming back to this episode of the Handyman Hotline. I've owned my house for about 8 months or so since we are making this recording. We moved in October, we bought the house in June, and we've had one project after another. So we thought this was a great time to do some updates about the house, where we're at, things we've done, and things I highly regret. The house itself has been a journey, and we are very excited about bringing that to you. And today we're going to be talking a lot about all the things from the garage that I am going to have to do something about in the next couple of months, maybe hopefully a year, from the basement that I really want to make sure that we can avoid a future flood, because we had a terrible flood in there before, apparently, the previous owners. And then the roof that had 5 layers of shingles on it. And then the kitchen that my spouse demanded that I work on, even though I thought it was a bad idea. And today it's going to be a lot of, talking about frustrations and about the hurdles that we face. I feel like when we talk about home ownership, if you don't talk enough about generational trauma, and I make this joke constantly, but when we are doing any household work, we are dealing with other people's decisions. And I think it's really easy to throw people under the bus. I think it's really easy to have the mentality of, you know what? I don't think that this person had 2 cents to rub together. Like, I think that they absolutely were out of this world when it comes to what they were thinking. Like, it makes no sense. And I think that they're dumb. And what were they thinking, And I think that is a fair thing to say. Like, I understand why we would come to that conclusion. But I also would argue that people do a lot of things for a reason. Be it something going on in their life, be it financial struggles, be, what's really in and architecturally very big at the time. One of the things that we hear the most about is vaulted ceilings and drop ceilings, and why so many, especially northeastern houses, have these amazing, beautiful vaulted ceilings that are just covered up by the drop ceiling. And I think people don't always understand why. And one of the main reasons why people do it is because it's way more energy efficient. If you are someone who is on a fixed income, or you're someone that is just like, it's hard to heat a house that big, and those ceilings would make it so hard, and it's going to make that room way more drafty. I can understand why you would want to lower the ceiling and then try to trap the heat more in that room. And that makes sense. Now, do I think that it causes headaches later on? And do I think that it is an eyesore often? Yeah, I do. But at the same time, I'm never going to knock someone's reasoning. When we moved into our house, the day 1 or 2 thing that I did was rip up the carpet that was covering up the beautiful hardwood floor. The internet loved it. It was a very hot topic on the internet for a whole day or two. People were so upset that someone would hide a beautiful hardwood floor that looked like it, was maybe freshly refinished at one point. And it didn't look like it was that beat up, So people were really questioning why anyone would use a carpet to cover it up. And I have a few theories, and all of them relate to the idea of knowing that the owners were in their early 80s and late 70s. And I think that it's really important for us to keep in context that they've had the house for 35 years before we even bought the house. And that 35 years of, before they gave the house to us, or they sold the house, right? they essentially needed to make sure that they could live in that house. And one of the big things is, hey, if you're older and you fall, you're going to have some major issues. But you fall on padded carpeting, and this carpeting was very padded. This was a shag carpet, essentially, with this real thick foam that was underneath. I mean, they took extra precaution to make sure that if you fell, it wasn't going to hurt you severely. I also think they hated the squeaky floors. I can talk a lot about that in the basement and how we can prevent squeaky floors in our floorboards. But I think that in our house, you literally can't walk anywhere without a squeak happening. And I think that their solution to that was just adding foam on top of it as well, and then carpeting, because that's easier than doing all the other things you would have to do to try to prevent those squeaks and the moving of the floorboards. So I think that it makes sense to me, and I think we need to cut some people slacks, because when we took up the carpet, it wasn't really that bad at all. They did a really good job making sure that most of the carpet was going to not be damaging the floor at all, and it was actually preserving it really well, to the point where we didn't actually refinish it, even though I really wish we would have. One of the reasons why we didn't refinish the living room floor and the bedroom floors is because we just didn't have all the financial abilities. And I did not want to refinish a hardwood floor myself because I haven't done it before. Even though I am the handyman, I haven't done every job under the sun yet. But I will also say that when it comes to those kind of jobs, you can do a really good job if you're a DIYer. I think you have to have patience, though, and I don't have enough of it. I think that those jobs, experience will carry you through a lot of the times. But if you have never done it before, you require so much patience to do a job like that and make sure that you don't make a mistake. And it won't take much to make a major mistake with that kind of material. So all of that being said, we're going to start off this discussion with one of the very first projects we did on the house, period. And that project was the roof. Now, I've talked previously about the roof many times, but when we bought the house, we knew right away that we were going to face challenges with the roof. Everyone, even the neighbors came up to us and were like, "Oof, you got to do something about that roof." A lot of the neighbors were like, "I have never seen anyone do any work on that roof, and it's been 40 years, you know?" And that's wild. And to be honest, I don't know if they took off the shingles and did a full replacement of shingles in maybe 50 years. It was pretty wild. 5 layers of shingles is pretty nuts. It may, honestly, it may never have had fresh coat of shingles on it before. 5 layers is just an absolutely insane amount to do, and it's too heavy for most roofs. And it's illegal to do and against code in, I think, almost everywhere. So here's the hot take on all of this. When we were going to do this roof, I had a home inspector come and let me know, like, hey, what we need to look out for. And the number one thing that this home inspector said was, that roof is probably going to cost you $45,000 to $50,000 to get replaced. And I was like, yeah, I had that feeling. And he's like, yeah, it's if you know how to do it, I would do it. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And the other thing that the inspector told us was we were having some leakages in the basement that were coming from the roof. So, like, our venting was really the issue and our chimney was the issue. So we had to make sure we were adding proper flashing and really took care when we were making the cricket. And the cricket is this thing that is attached to your roof that is leaning up against your chimney. And it's essentially like a little, like, roof or a shed that is, like, between your roof and your chimney. So this angle that you're having on the house, that slope that you're having on the house, there is going to be a slope that's going to go right into your chimney, right? Well, right there, if you just leave that open, you don't add anything, you're going to have an area where you can actually have an ice dam and water can pool up right on that part. So you're making anything that has a 90-degree angle on the roof should be cautious, right? So like putting something there that can make sure the water's going to run off is like super important. So the Cricut acts as like a little shelter to prevent any ice dams, and you should be able to roll it off the roof essentially, right? So we had to really take into account how to do that because the old one was not very good. It was a lot of rust on it, and it had to be taken out. So there was a lot of work to do. So going into that project was a nightmare to begin with. But this was June when we bought the house, and I was like, okay, let's aim for sometime in July. We got to do it right away. We don't want to mess with that. We're only going to have summer for so many months. Let's rush this one. And here's the thing. I knew right away there was two major projects we were going to do, and that was removing the asbestos from the basement and doing the garage, doing the roof. And those were huge expenses that we were doing at the same time. We spent about, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think we spent like $7,000 or $8,000 on the asbestos removal, I think. And then we spent in material alone, it was about $9,000 of just material. And then I had to hire friends to help me with the roof. So, I mean, it's like $20,000 was gone in like a 2-week period. That is so much money. And it was such a frustrating experience to be like, we were under the time, and we were trying to get things done as fast as we could. And it was just so much pressure. So we went into trying to make sure we could actually predict how much shingles we were going to need and how much materials we were going to need. So I don't know a lot about those things. I just knew that I'm going to want a little bit more than what was actually being, said to me. So we bought a few extra bundles, but essentially a friend of mine who is a math teacher and I got on the phone, and they told me basically how to use, an equation to figure out how to solve how much square footage you had in the roof. And we used that information to then translate to how much bundles we needed. And then we use that information to then buy, any of the prep starter, the stuff that like the strips that you have underneath all your shingles to start. To protect the roof underneath your shingles. We had the ice and water barrier that we had to get. We had a drip edge that we had to get. We had to get all the extra flashing. We had to get, new, ventilation hoods. We had to get, we had to make a new Cricut. We had to do a lot of stuff and a lot of materials. But day one, we started in the morning. We worked well into like 5 or 6 in the afternoon. And we had maybe 1/16 of the roof of the shingles removed. We were so exhausted. It was so hard to remove these shingles. It was, once we got like about one row done and we removed about one part of it, then we realized, holy shit, there is literally like, there's 5 gosh darn layers on this. And I knew this going in, but we didn't have your regular sheathing. We had boards going across, just like I think my brain is gonna betray me, but I think it was like 6x12s, like just pieces of boards going across the roof. And all this was old lumber, and all this was pretty strong. So I think that had a lot to do with it. Like I think that the fact that it was older, stronger wood, and because of the strength of each one of those boards in the surface area, I think they generally had more strength than regular sheathing does. At least that's my theory. And that's why it was able to hold, because I don't know how else they could have done this. I mean, it's so crazy risky to put that many layers on the roof. I think another thing that I pointed out to Zizi this past weekend, because we just hit like, -1 degrees outside at one point, 5-degree weather outside. And our house is really drafty still. We got to work on that for next year. And one of the things I noticed that in the kitchen, there was drafts coming from the ceiling, And even in the cabinets, our cabinets go all the way up into the ceiling. And then when I open it up, you could just feel the cold air coming through. And especially by the sink, it's just so much cold air coming through in the kitchen. And I told Zizi, I was like, I'm going to tell you right now, I think that one of the reasons why they didn't have to worry about the heat in the winter and stuff, and the reason why they didn't have proper insulation in the attic is because the roof had 5 layers of shingles on it. They probably were trapping in the heat so well for having that much on the roof that they didn't need a whole lot extra when it came to trying to make sure that you kept the heat in. So I think that there's problems with the house that we're going to see, now that we wouldn't have seen before because of that. One of the other aspects when we were going into this was I didn't really take into account how much manpower I needed or how much person power I needed. And one of the things is I really thought I knew people who were doing this for a living who did it with 2 people. I really thought all I needed was one other person to start with, and maybe to help me get started on certain parts of it, like adding the drip edge or, doing the first row of shingles. I thought that's all I needed. Well, it turns out that when you're doing 5 layers of shingles, you need about 11 people. And I hit up every single Tom, Dick, and Harry that I could. And it took an entire second day. So the first day, we barely made an impact. The second day, I had my chosen pa come over. John was amazing. And a whole bunch of old friends I've had over the years. And I think we got done with almost all of the roof shingles that day. And it took about 11 hours to remove all the shingles. So we didn't even start prepping the roof until day 3. An absolute nightmare. Now, pros could do this. Sometimes pros do this in one day. And I'm like breathless about this. 1 or 2 days a lot of the times. At the worst, 3 days, right? There's definitely exceptions to the rules, but that's the basics, especially with a ranch-style house that has such a simple slope on it. Our roof is not very steep. Our roof, you can walk on pretty easy, and it doesn't take much. It's also only like a 10-foot, climb. It's really not that tough at all. But I did create this wonderful little ladder elevator that I used to bring up the bundles that really saved mine and my dad's back. We brought up all the bundles by ourselves. And because by the time that I finally got to adding the shingles, by the time I finally did that, it was day 4. It was an absolute nightmare, but it took until day 4. And I think halfway through day 4, we actually had a rainstorm and I couldn't finish the roof myself. It was a lot. So basically, to recap all of that is I immediately regretted my decision and the lack of prep. And I really thought I had the preppage ready to go. I mean, I had, 2 ladders already set up. I had my little ladder self-levelers. I made these pieces of wood that were plywood that I screwed to the roof that essentially kept a stabilizer, it kept the ladder in place and prevented any problems. I even bungee cabled it around the stabilizer to make sure it was never going to pull away. And then one of the ladders operated as a ladder, as a elevator. So fucking great, I thought it was ready to go and we were so prepared, but we had to throw out every single plan on day 1. And day 1 ruined everything when it took us that long to remove anything, and when I was growing up, I did the roof with my dad. I did a roof on my cousin's house. I did a roof on my uncle's house. And we always used pitchforks to remove the shingles because pitchforks can get underneath there and you can just grab a whole bunch at one time and you just kind of push it down. But they do make tools now that can get underneath the shingles and pull up and pull the nails and screws and pull the nails up and push it right out. But the problem with all that, the problem with all that is that none of that is made for 5 layers of shingles. And it didn't really matter. We tried shovels. We tried everything. We tried short-handled versions of the tools. We tried long handles. We tried. Nothing was going to beat the fact that we were just going to need to do hard physical labor, and we were just going to need to put our backs into it and make it work. And it wasn't easy. We were sweating up a storm the entire time. I actually have a permanent scar on my body for cutting into my arm. Cutting into my arm with the flashing that was around the chimney. So it was like an absolute nightmare. It was one of the hardest jobs I've done in a very long time. And even though we got it done, it took me and my chosen pa about 10 work days. Saying that out loud makes me so mad. But we took about 10 work days. A lot of it had to do with the fact that we kept encountering problem after problem because of the fact the roof had so many issues. One of the reasons why we couldn't start adding the shingles on day 3 was because there was so much rot that was happening on the edges of the roof because it was, hadn't been taken care of for years. So we had to cut out full sections of the roof and then add in sheathing. We had to do that in multiple spots. We had areas where it was a complete wreck in the corner of the house, and we had to redo that. That took so much time. We had to kind of reinvent the wheel with a Cricut because our Cricut was completely rotted out, and the flashing was way beyond rust. It was a lot of stuff, and removing all that stuff that was on there for decades was just so difficult. Hence why I went to the ER because I cut my arm and had to have 8 stitches was because of that. It was just everything was just like attached to the roof at that point. It wasn't even, there's no way we were going to get it off. Because of all those factors, it just took so much time. And it was only me at one point doing most of the shingling. And then once we were done with day 4 and 5, I finished the entire roof in about 4 more days on the other side. And then I finished up on day 10. So that was it. That was the roof. It took me 2 weeks, essentially. Day after I finished the roof, we went to the Renaissance Fair. I looked really pretty. And at home, I fell over and I gave myself a black eye and a concussion. And I was laid up for like 4 days. So I lost basically 3 weeks from the roof and the fall. And it soaked up so much of our time that we had a very small window left. So here we are. We did the roof. We did the asbestos remover. They were working in the basement while we were working on the roof. We had the dumpster that was ready there. Unfortunately, I had to pay extra for the dumpster because I calculated there to be about, a certain tonnage with the actual roof shingles that we were removing. And because there was so much extra, it was way past that. So I had to pay an extra like $400. That was not fun. But we used the dumpster was super handy. We got it from a local business here in Madison. They showed up. It actually had an attached outhouse. And I don't think any of us used it, but I do think the contractors used it quite a bit when they were there removing the asbestos. So, hey everyone, this is Mercury in the future, and I would like to give you a special note for the rest of the episode. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you are now going to see an audio visualizer the rest of the episode. Now, the reason why that is because Basil, in the middle of us recording an episode, thought this was a good time to start playing around with it, and it will be showing up and changing the rest of the show. Everyone, this is what ADHD looks like. So enjoy the show. There was a lot more we had to do. We wanted to do the living room. We wanted to do the, ZZ's bedroom and my bedroom and then our shared bedroom. We had so much we wanted to do. ZZ came to me and said, hey, I really want to do the kitchen. And this was back right before we started doing the roof. And Z was like, I really want to do the kitchen. And I said, the kitchen is great. And I know you want to do it, but that's going to have to fall on you because I have so much things we have to do. We have to do the basement. We have to do all these rooms. You want me to paint all this. You want me to redo the flooring? You want me to do the roof? I have to be able to focus on those things and not do the kitchen. So Z was like, yeah, I'll do the kitchen. I'll do the kitchen. And in an ideal world, when we were stripping the paint off of that cabinetry, we would have been able to use green products that were affordable, that were really effective. That would be an ideal world. Unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, and the green products that ZZ spent a long time looking for that were going to be the best ones, oof, boy, the price tag is so much money. It was like $80 on a container, and a container is half the size of a normal, stripper. So it was pretty rough, but I wanted. It's one of those things where I'm going to trust my spouse and they're going to give it a try and we're going to figure out the problems later, But we hit a brick wall immediately. The stripper was not really effective. We put on this chemical and then we wrapped it with at first ZZ didn't do it because ZZ wasn't really familiar with how to strip it. So they didn't put anything to cover it up. But when you're stripping cabinets, my biggest thing of advice is that to wrap it with plastic to try to conceal that chemical eating away at that paint. And then when you come the next day, it should be all bubbled up. So you should be able to just scrape it off with a scraper. A 5-in-1 tool works really well. Anything that can get underneath there and remove it. But I think we had like 16 doors. And I believe that we were only able to get 4 doors that were complete in like a couple days. But ZZ got sick and was laid up. And then there was a lot of stuff going on in their day job. So it was very hard for Z to commit to that. So at one point, Z looked at me and said, hey, can you do me a favor and actually finish up all the cabinets? And I said, woo, yeah, I totally can. And I did that. I said, yeah, let's just, you know what? Let's roll with the punches, baby. So I took a charge of it, and I think in like 3 days we got it all done. Sanding it, taking everything off of it, then prepping it, and primering it. It was just so much work. It was so much work to strip all of the cabinets too that were built in. The built-in cabinets were so difficult, and trying to make sure we got the chemical in there without damaging things, and finding the right sanders and the right materials, and then using a Dremel to sand some spots we couldn't get to by hand. It was just so much detailed work that it just took us so long. It took us 2 weeks to do that kitchen. And technically we're not done because we haven't done the ceiling yet. And once we do the ceiling, then I think we can call it quits and feel a little confident about. But it's been a little rough in that kitchen. And it was kind of a point of contention between me and Z for a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Especially when we got down to moving in day. It was like I was literally working days and days to try to get the house done. I took away time from doing my job in order to do all that at home and then getting ready for the moving. And the moving was such a hassle. It was so much work. This was such an overwhelming experience. And I think the thing that kills me with all this is, like, none of this is new to me. Like, this stuff isn't necessarily new to me. Everything I tackled, I've done before. But I think in the sense of, like, this is my money. This is my time. These are my mistakes that I'm going to need to look at every single damn day. I as someone who really prides herself in being a perfectionist when it comes to my job, I think it was just really genuinely very hard for me to understand that, like, hey, this is my money and time, and if I don't get it right, I can always work on it later. But I didn't want to accept that. I was like very hell-bent on getting it right the first time and doing everything a certain way. And I think it kind of messed with us pretty bad. So when we used the other stripper, it was an orange stripping agent that we used. I forgot what kind we used. But we used it. Once we used that, it sped it up really fast. And then we were able to use the primer that was specifically for that kitchen. Z and I were going back and forth about what we wanted to do. And I told Z that we're going to need to spend a little bit more money for the kitchen primer because I want it to be mildew and mold resistant. And then I also want us to get like a semi-gloss for our top coat, our finish coat. And the reason why is because it's easier to clean. When you have more gloss, it just repels more and it's easier to clean overall. Anything that is flatter is going to be more of an issue. Eggshell's not bad, but you don't want to go, you don't want to like go to like, actually, as I said, eggshell. I don't think eggshell. I think it's satin isn't bad. But anyways, I'm getting all tied up in all the weeds. But when it comes down to it, the kitchen has a lot of personalities. That big green kitchen is so nice to look at, but it's essentially not finished yet, and I'm still heartbroken I wasn't able to do it in the time frame that the spouse mouse wanted me to. And there's just so much more we want to do. Every night we just efficiently got our TV off the floor after living there for 4 months. Our TV was on the floor for the longest time, but we just got it off the floor and put it on entertainment center that we got. And we got this wonderful little sectional for our living room now. We don't have a curtain for the front window because our front window is so massive. It's a massive window. And ZZ and I have been really talking about how to have almost like a hotel curtain that has like two different curtains. One is like a blackout, and then one is like, like from like a decor kind of thing. And I want to be able to hide those tracks that are in the ceiling. So we're going to add like a skirt that hangs down from the ceiling that covers up all of that. And that's going to take time too. So there's a lot of these projects, a lot of these things I want to do that I know I can do, but getting the time to do it has been the hurdle. And on top of all that, now I have to work around cats. It's hard, as someone who's always told people, hey, make sure you put away your cats when you do this work, right? Make sure your cats are in a different room, or they're in their kennel, or whatever you got. Right? Or make sure they're in their catio. Whatever makes the cat happy, put it there for a little bit. Our little cat Nitro refused to deal with that. And at one point, when ZZ was painting and I was gone for the weekend, Nitro found himself into green paint. And his little tail was, it had some good green on it. He had a little bit of green on his ear. And he was just getting into all the mess. And I like text ZZ back. I was like, baby, you gotta put him away. And Z was like, I did. He unlocked the door. He's always known how to open doors. But our specific kind of doors at home just have a good enough of a turn to it that he's able to get out. They don't always latch right either. So either he turned it or he pushed it real hard and he got out. So our cat is an escape artist, and that has made it difficult for us to deal with. So working around the cats and doing all that work was absolutely exhausting. It took us about 3 months or so to get to all of that, to take out the asbestos, to power wash the garage, to add in the gutters that I had not finished properly yet. I got to finish the gutters. And it being winter, I'm not too happy that that's where I'm at, but I'm going to cut myself some slack, and I think you should cut yourself some slack too when you're doing your house, and hope that it's not going to come back and bite you in the butt too much. And then we did the roof, and then we did the kitchen. So we did so much work. Plus, I fixed the front entry door, the back entry door. I added in the new locks. I fixed up the bathroom and did various things with the bathroom too. Added in the bidet. I changed several of the light fixtures that I still have to figure out because we're having some weird electrical issues in the house, and I want to make sure we address that sooner rather than later. There's just so much that we have done in that time period. The furnace was such a nightmare. Now, for those who didn't know and who didn't follow me online for this one, there was a furnace in our house that was about 30 years old, about 25 to 30 years old. And it was pretty old. I mean, they came to look at it eventually, and they decided that it was beyond repair, and it really was. It was really beyond repair. But I was determined to fix it. So I did some things that I would never advise. And this is what frustrates me so much. It's like every single thing I've done in the house, I've run into such a big hurdle. And it frustrates me as a professional. It frustrates me so much. It's like, I know I can handle this. And I know that as a professional, we run into these obstacles all the time. But it feels so much different when it's your house. It feels so much different, especially when you're working alone most days. So I'm trying to figure out why we're not getting any heat anymore from our furnace. We did for one day, and then it did not work anymore. When it did not work anymore, I should have really checked every single part of this furnace. And I thought I did, but I missed a switch on the side of the furnace. There's this little, like you open up the furnace, and this chamber that's holding where the pilot light is. On the side of it, in a way back, there's a switch, and that can help reset it. Now, we could not find the manual, and this was such an old thing that when I called up the manufacturer, they walked me through everything, and they did not even mention the switch. I don't have a control board that had an entire thing laying out where to go. Like, this flashing means this, and that flashing means that. The control board had none of that. There's no indicators. So I had to kind of go into this completely blind and not really know what I was looking for, and use a lot of my troubleshooting skills to try to eliminate what was going on. And at first, we went after the pressure switch. It wasn't the pressure switch. And then we went after, the gas valve, and it wasn't a gas valve. And then we went after, I think actually we went after the burner first, and the burner didn't work. There was just a igniter, rather. We went after all these different things, and I ended up dropping around $600, $700 on this. And it didn't work. And then I had to call a professional. And this is the thing that will stick in me for a while. I want to remind you, I'm a #1 New York Times bestselling author. I have sold more books than a lot of folks have, right? We're almost at 80,000 sold. That's an amazing achievement. I was talked down to by a man about home repair, and it stings like a mother heifer. I called up a company, and they came over to give me a quote. And I told them, I did some work on the furnace, and I went through every single step I did. And he looked at me and said, "You made it worse." And I worked as a tradesperson for 19 years. I understand the mentality of you made it worse, because that can happen sometimes. I did not make it worse. What I did was I eliminated problems for him to have to look at. And this hurt especially because I needed him to fix it, and I didn't have much of a choice. And ZZ has EDS, and they're very sensitive to the cold. And it was getting colder. It was about the end of November at this point, and we just had to do it. We just had to go for it. And even though this guy was rude to me, and after he found out that the reset button was not switched, he gave me shit for that. And then he found out the heat exchanger had holes in it, and that's why it wasn't working at all. So that was rough. That was real hard. And the heat exchanger going out is like the last thing you want to hear from an HVAC. From a furnace rather. You do not want your heat exchanger to go out. It's the most expensive part. And all the other parts usually can run anywhere between like $50 to $200, $300. I think the gas valve was the most expensive. That was like $450. But everything else was not terrible. And if it was newer, if the model wasn't super old, it wouldn't be that terrible. And a lot of that stuff is kind of plug and play. It's not super difficult to do, but the heat exchanger takes everything to the next level. So Unfortunately, we had to have this guy who was really rude to me have his company work on it. And I begrudgingly said, yeah, sure. And next day, someone came over and did it, and it was done. And it's been working fine. We got a 2-phase furnace. It keeps the house real warm, and it's real quiet. We're not really hearing much. That is where we're at, and where my ego has been. My ego has been in the ground. But if you want to help my ego, if you want to make me feel loved and supported, there's no better way than supporting us on Patreon or Substack. That's right, everybody. It's sponsor time. And the sponsor is me. We are a wonderful little pirate ship here. We rely on the audience to help us keep the boat afloat. And we have amazing merchandise on our website, from our hat, amazing stickers. We have so much cool stuff on there. And then including our book, Safe and Sound Renter's Friendly Guide to Home Repair, written by me, Mercury Stardust. The book itself has QR codes in it. It has very simple, straightforward directions about how to do things, fundamentals about what you want to have in your toolbox, and it really addresses the relationship between you and the landlord. It talks about renters' rights. It has a whole chapter on it, and it has beautiful imagery through the entire book to give you a little bit of a hug while you are dealing with a lot of things that are pretty not fun sometimes. So you can get the book right now wherever you buy books. We highly encourage you to go to bookshop.org and support your independent bookstores, or you can get an autographed version of my book on our website, mercurystardust.com. And if you already have a book and you want to get an autograph, but you're not anywhere near me, you can get a book plate that has an autograph signature from me, and we'll deliver it to you. We have a whole section in the studio that's just for shipping, and it is a fun time for Basil to go through all that and make sure that you get it. And they have a blast doing it. So don't worry, Basil loves organizing stuff. Give them more fun. So that is one way to support us. You can also support us on Patreon or Substack. We are doing these early releases of the podcast on Substack and Patreon. You'll be able to get this stuff earlier if you go to those ways to support us. We do weekly newsletters on Substack right now too, and you'll be able to keep track of all the things that we're up to. And that's a wonderful way to support me, but also is a wonderful way to learn a little bit more, because you get more exclusive information about DIY things and about supporting us in various different ways. Now that I've talked completely about all the things that I've done in the last 8 months, it's kind of like, where are we going to go? Like I said, it's winter. So we're in the planning periods right now. We are probably going to start doing some major projects when we hit the late March, maybe April and May. But one of the major projects we have to talk about is the garage and the basement. Now, the garage and basement of areas where we think of for storage, right? Like a lot of us will be like, oh, that's where you keep storage. That's where you store the cars. That's where you have your bikes. Or in the basement, that's where maybe you have it a little bit partially furnished. Maybe you don't. So what do you want to do with it, right? Where do you want to start? The foundation of the garage is a separate slab from the driveway itself. But that slab doesn't have a seam down the middle. Now, typically, when you have a garage as large as ours, we have like a just slightly bigger than a 2-stall garage. And because of that, there should be somewhat of a seam or several seams in the concrete that we're going to help keep it from crashing into itself. So because there is no seam, but there is a slope, there's a slight slope on both sides of the garage that go right into the middle that will then drain out through the back of the garage that has a hole in the back of the garage for drainage. I don't typically see garages like this. This is a little bit of a uniquer design here in Wisconsin. We don't run into this a ton. But the major problem is because of that slope that is right in the middle. You have a high end on the one side and a high end on another side, and in the middle is the lowest point. Because of that, you're kind of having your concrete slam into itself into the middle, which is causing cracks all through the garage, and now it's having lifting because it's crashing into itself. It's like, it's like glaciers essentially, right? It's crashing into itself, and then it's forming, a little hill in your garage, and it's not wonderful. There's also another big issue with the garage is that not only does the shingles in the garage have to be replaced, it also has to be, we got to address the gutters that are so not doing their job. And there is definitely some ice dams that are forming and that have formed in the past and have definitely caused damage underneath the soil and things as well, and have lifted up that concrete. It has not been a wonderful experience watching the garage this winter. There isn't much we can do right now, and I'm not going to ring the panic button just yet. But that garage is not in great shape. We have several windows that are being rotted out that need to be addressed. We did clean and power wash the garage last year to really see it. But when we power washed the garage, I literally saw more problems, right? It was so dirty. It was even hard to tell what it was like underneath. But once we power washed it, I could tell there was even more problems. So at least 2 windows are rotted out. We had to fix one of the garage doors that didn't work at all. And then the overhead door, I had to replace some components of the overhead door as well. So there's been a lot going on with the garage already. But the thing we're going to have to do something about next year is going to have to be that concrete. I really want to be able to have a garage that I can turn into a wood shop at least partial of the year. I have also had plans of extending the back of the garage. You have rules on how much land you can use on your lot that, you can only keep so much, that is a lot and that is, a building. So you have to work within that limit. But I would love to extend the back of the garage and be able to have a wood shop in the back of the garage. That would be my biggest dream. I would feel like Santa's little helper, and I would be able to make my little devices and make my little furniture and make things for the house and be completely separated from the house, but also have an actual functional wood shop right in the backyard. That would be the biggest dream, and I think that's kind of where we're heading. But we have to figure out the foundation, and then we might have to do some major changes to the garage to make that happen. And we're going to need to consult some professionals who are not just me and try to figure out what will be the best train of action with that. So that's where we're at with the garage. And it would be such a dream to be able to have a self-efficient little garage in the back of the house. A little shop, that is, One of the things we got to do is then it would be like we got to insulate the garage. Then I would want to be able to use plywood on the walls or OSB in the walls. Basically, I wouldn't have the walls be drywall. I would just have them be wood all the way across. So I could just hang anything anywhere, and I wouldn't have to worry about finding a stud. So that would be what I would want to do, is just make my garage an entire area that I can use for storage and things. We also have rafters in our garage that's open. I would probably fill that in as well, add an installation so the whole garage itself can stay warm. I want to actually get heat in the garage as well, and I want to do that for the wood shop if we did that. So it's a bigger project. Do we make that a priority or not? That's really where we're at. The concrete is the biggest deal, I think. I want to get to that before we get to a worse problem. Right now, we can actually put the cars in there, but it's at the point where it may go south sooner than you think, and that concrete might be a bigger issue than you think. So the next thing is the basement. The basement itself originally had 9x9 black and white tiles. And we had got those removed by asbestos team that literally came in, did it all in one day, did an amazing job. And they did such an immaculate job, and they let us film them too. But now there's some other things I have to address in the garage, in the basement, and that is I probably have to use self-leveling cement in parts of the basement because it is a little lumpy in some spots. And if I'm going to furnish it, which is my goal, then those are things we're going to have to take care of, right? Where do I start in a basement? Well, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? I know that there are functional spots that I need to be able to have access to. And I don't want to cover up things in the ceiling that I'm going to need to have access to. So my plan is to where the HVAC is and where the water heater is and the chimney are, I'm going to have that be its own separate room, that whole area where I can easily access the back of it and the front of it and the sides of it and have room to operate. I do not want to close it off so tightly that I have issues reaching things. I want to be able to make it easy enough to get in and out of that area and not have to worry about it. The next thing is there is really only 2 areas of my basement that have overhead things that I will have to access in a pretty high degree. There's right underneath my bathroom, there is the piping for that, and there are some other things that are in the area, especially for our main water line, right? All that is in that one area. Now, on the other side where the washer and dryer are, there is also a gas pipe and an electrical panel. Both of those separate areas, I want to have more of an open ceiling to some degree, or at least something that I can pop open and access to more quickly. Those are the structural things that I need. What I want is another room, like another bedroom downstairs, and a living space that we can have, like a living room that maybe has like a bar in one side. I think it'll just be really cute to entertain our friends there. And then a little miniature indoor shop that I think will be really fun to have for various little house projects and things. So that's my goal and my dream. Will we get there? I don't know. There's so much to do. I feel like there is just so much to do constantly with the house that I get it. This is why we're writing the book. I'm going through it while the audience is going through it as well. And that first year of homeownership is just so much stress, and it can be really overwhelming at times. But that's where we're at. And I hope you guys are enjoying watching where we're at and seeing where this is going. So I hope that you stay tuned, because it's been a wild ride so far, and who knows what's going to happen. So thank you so much for watching this episode of the Handyman Hotline. What an overwhelming experience it has been talking about this even. Like, wow, it's been such a wild ride. When we first got the keys to the house, I was so elated, but I was also scared, because I know a lot of the responsibility falls on me to fix things up and bring this house back to life. And it's just been a process to do. But I couldn't have gotten this house without ZZ. ZZ did a lot of the paperwork, a lot of the hard stuff that I do not like doing, a lot of the financial figuring out. And we were a good team, and we've been hanging in there together to make it all work. And it's just been really nice to enjoy our house together. And our cats are having a blast. Paulo is obsessed with the house. My partner Reese came over not that long ago, and they brought their dog Toolbox. Yes, there's a dog in my life named Toolbox, and he's perfect. And Toolbox came to the house, and they're from Colorado, so they don't come out here very often. But Reese came over with Toolbox, and the boys have never interacted with a dog before, but we have a French door that it's separating from the exterior door and the basement. So there's a French door that's in the kitchen before you have to get down in the basement. So Toolbox is just sitting on the top of this area, like right when you first come in, but you're not in the kitchen yet. And he's behind the French door. And Apollo comes around the corner, and he looks, and he sees Toolbox, and he immediately looks at me like, what the fuck is that? What is this? What is that? I don't know what that is. And Toolbox was so calm and cool, and he was so sweet. He didn't bark at all. They just looked at each other, and they had such good dispositions that we weren't scared at all. So then when Toolbox left, Apollo meowed for hours at that door. And now every single night we have to let Apollo, after he gets his nightly treat, him and Nitro have to share They get like a half a churro each. And then Apollo will go to the door, meow, and demand to be let down in the basement, and he'll have to have basement time. We call it the basement boys. The basement boys, Apollo and Nitro, and they got to have basement time. And they just walk around the area and just meow and sniff everything. And it's been really fun to see the cats have a bigger space and to be able to live their little kitty lives. Because Apollo's older now, Apollo's going on about 11 years old, we've been calling it the kitty retirement home. So it's been really nice to give him that. He's been such a good boy. So it's wonderful to give him that experience. But that's where we're at. I hope that if you're listening to this, that if you're an overwhelmed homeowner, I hope that you know that you're not alone, and that even a professional like me who's been doing this for a long time, I mean, it's just a wild experience, especially because we took on a home that had problems. We took on a home, we had problems. You know, we famously did not do a home inspection. People really gave me a lot of shit for it, but I know what I'm doing, right? Like I specifically chose this house because of those problems, so I can fix those problems, so I can show you how to deal with those problems. You know what I mean? So I think it's been really good. It's just been an experience. And thank you so much for hanging in there with us. Thank you for being there for us. If you want to, please support us on Patreon and Substack. And remember, as always, you are worth the time it takes to learn a new skill. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Handy Ma'am Hotline. Mercury Stardust is the Handy Ma'am, and this episode was produced by me, Basil. Our theme song is written and performed by Rhodey Walker. You can find all of our back catalog of the Handy Ma'am Hotline on our Substack, where I'm also writing weekly update posts. So come check it out. We'll see you next time.
That was great!
Mercury Stardust.
Mercury Stardust. But that's not the melody at all. The Mercury Stardust.
Look at our fun new little waveform.
I know, but it's been distracting me the whole time. But it is cute. Is that going to be in the recording?
I'm mostly playing with it over here on the
Oh, okay.
the vertical, so it shouldn't be.
It was.